gonna laugh at you. I'll laugh at you. He made them sound like this.
Let me see whether the plug is on. The plug is here. I would love to talk about a document that came out just about when I started my advocacy path. And this is a resource document from the U.S. Department of Education, and it talks about ways of reducing restraint and seclusion. I mean, that's really was the intention of this, and it also talks about the definitions. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of different definitions for restraint and seclusion from state to the feds, but this document is super important. And the reason why I bring this up is because one of the things that I've studied over the years is the data. And there's data that we get from the Maine Department of Education, and there's also data that we get from the U.S. Office of Civil Rights. Okay, and they call it the Civil Rights Data Collection. And I've used it to actually look up specific schools, to look for patterns of schools that might be having challenges with too much use of restraint and seclusion. But
can I just ask a question
absolutely.
About that? So you are looking them up based on the incident reports that were filed? Is that how you are evaluating when the restraints and seclusions are taking place?
That's an excellent question, because the Office of Civil Rights does it very differently than the Maine Department of Education.
Okay.
And the Maine Department of Education relies on data supplied by superintendents, and the Office of Civil Rights relies on data. It could also be sent from superintendents, but it's filled out through a different stream. Okay. So they're really, unfortunately, not completely apples to apples.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
They still matter.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because you can go up and look up each district, each school, and find out information about your school. And sometimes it's really helpful to know, because if your school is really low, then you know it's not a big habit in your school. But unfortunately, some schools have gotten into the habit of managing serious behavior with restraint and seclusion. And it's especially true for students with disabilities. And so you can either look on the Maine Department of Education's website. They have a restraint and seclusion page, and it includes the Chapter 33 rule. It includes Maine's data. And I think it's really important because especially for students with disabilities, I think they're misunderstood. They're not bad kids. They just have some really complex, challenging behavior.
Yes.
And I wish more people cared about the issue. It's a tough issue. It really is. It's not something that you have coffee talk over with any average person.
It's not. And in fact, I know we've talked before that sometimes as you're entering the world of restraint and seclusion, when you're introduced to that, it can feel private. It can feel sort of shameful, like, oh, I don't want my, kids' peers' parents knowing this. Like, what if they don't want him hanging out with them? Or, there can be a lot of just emotions that are all balled up in it as well.
Absolutely. So. And I've been there, so yeah. I know. I haven't forgotten those days. Of course, like I've said a few times, this is what drives me to be an advocate and to help other families. And when using data is a tool, just like behavioral data, to, and this is more of a school-wide look, but sometimes it gives you information about your school and what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, it's tricky. But working collaboratively with your team is what gets things done.